Welcome to the plastic poison assembly video. Here you see all the stuff. We're going to go ahead and get that out of the way. The first step is to install the charge jack. You need to take the jack nut off the charge jack. That's that little ring. You'll put the charge jack through the chassis and use the jack nut to screw it on from the bottom. The charge jack is also your power switch. It's how you'll turn the robot on and off. When the plug is in, the robot is off. When the plug is out, the robot is on. And once you get it screwed on, you're going to want to, I like to give it a little snug with a pair of needle nose just to make sure it's nice and tight because you don't want it coming loose in the middle of the fight. There you go. Now we're going to move on to getting the power routed. The lever clamps have three ports. The reds go with the red and the blacks go with the black. My personal favorite order of doing it is I put the main power from the battery slash charge jack in the first slot, the drive ESC power in the middle, and then the weapon ESC on the third slot. You'll notice when we plugged a little pigtail into the drive controller, that's just an XT30 pigtail that makes it so you don't have to cut, strip or solder anything to build the robot. That also gives it a little extra length to be more flexible when you install it in the robot. Once you've got them all connected, we will go ahead and grab the receiver and plug them in. You'll note the picture that's about to pop up is upside down because I like to have channel 1 on top. The pin closest to the body of the receiver is the signal pin. For these kits, you're going to want to use the single yellow wire from the drive ESC in channel 1. The 3-wire one goes in channel 2 with the white towards the middle, and channel 3 is the weapon, also with the white towards the middle. Once you get everything plugged in, you're going to want to use a zip tie and use those two holes in the bottom of the chassis to kind of tidy everything up. The receiver goes on the right side next to the charge jack, kind of intermingled with it. And then the lever clamps go on the left, and the wires will route to what will end up being underneath the wiring for the drive motor leads. So right now we're going to grab a zip tie and just tidy everything up so it's ready for the next step. Now the zip tie is not required, but it does make your life a lot easier if you're working on stuff in between fights, and also make sure nothing's going to rattle around and knock anything loose. We're going to move on to mounting the tires to the twist hubs. As you see in the video, my preferred way to do this is on the table. You can push down on them harder. So I grabbed some needle nose or the included twist hub key with your kit. You push down and then twist. And they lock into place. That's how they got their name, twist hubs. They use pressure to hold the tire on. And they're very easy to work with. Now on the back, you'll see a square nut. Well, eventually, right now that you're looking at the D shaft of the motor. When you mount the hub to the drive motor, you want to make sure the set screw goes onto the flat, which is called the D shaft. On the back of the twist hub, you see that little square nut. That's where the set screw is that you use to tighten it to the motor. You want to leave a little bit of space between the front of the motor and the tire on this kit because it's got to clear that little area where it drops into the chassis. So it'll center up real good if you leave, a couple millimeters of space left on the shaft on the inside. And if you can't magically find the set screw on the square nut like we're doing here, you can, push back the tire a little, just look. But the set screw is right there where the square nut is, but that's what it fastens through. Now we're going to grab the drive mounts. So these slide on the back of the motor. You'll notice when you look at them, there's two holes in the bottom. Um, you want to make sure the side with less space is towards the gearbox. That'll line up perfectly with the holes in the chassis. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and connect them as you go. The inner pair on the ESC goes to the left motor with the red wire where the plus sign is and the black wire where the no sign is. That's your plus and your minus. Make sure you get this correct because if you don't, it'll drive funny and then you have to take it apart and swap them around. So when you put them in, you'll use the little silver screws that come with the kit, and those just mount through the bottom of the chassis. These are self-threading screws, so the first time you do it, they'll kind of make their own path in the drive mounts. After you've done it a couple times, it'll be super fast, like this. If you do it too many times, eventually you might wear them out. But for the most part, you can get quite a few uses out of it. So now we'll go ahead and do the other side. On the right-hand motor, you use what's referred to the outer pair, which there's a good picture in the instructions describing which one's the outer and which one's the inner. The inner one is the two wires next to the capacitor, and the outer is the outer pair. On the right-hand motor, you flip-flop it from the left-hand motor. So the black wire goes to the positive tab on the motor, and the red wire goes to the nothing noted tab. And when you pop it in the chassis, just make sure all the wires are happy with each other, and then you can screw it in from the bottom. You can go ahead, the antenna from the receiver, they always tend to jump around, so just make sure it's sorted before you start putting stuff together. When it's tucked to somewhere nicely, it's fine. Now you're going to grab the battery, get it plugged in. Make sure your charge jack is plugged in before you do this, otherwise you'll power the robot on. The battery goes in the red JST plug, and it's red to red, black to black. And it just tucks in as you see there. I can grab your weapon motor. There are three plugs on that. It doesn't matter which way you plug them in for a horizontal because it can spin either way. On some of the other robots, it does matter. And for those, if you're spinning the wrong way, you just swap two plugs on the motor and it spins the other way. But for a horizontal, it generally doesn't matter too much unless you have a preference. When you mount the motor to the lid, you're going to use the three M3 8mm screws and pop the first one in and leave it a little bit loose so you can move the motor around, align the next one, and then go ahead and run them through and tighten them all down. Obviously, the wires will exit directly towards the back of the lid, so they go into the chassis. All right, once you've done that, you're gonna go ahead and grab the 1.5-inch screws along with the lock nuts. And this is what attaches your lid to the chassis. When you drop the lid on, you just want to make sure none of the wires are resting on top of the posts or anything in the way of anything else. It should sit nice and flat, like you see here. Like so there's one wire out of place, so I moved it, and all is well. The lid will stick up a touch because the lid is thicker, just to make it stronger. But you'll be able to tell if it's actually sitting on a wire or just sitting in its normal orientation. I like to do this with some pliers and then the hex key. If you want, you can go grab a proper wrench or socket. I just always have a couple needle nose on the desk, and it's just easy to do it that way. I like to alternate, like do the angles across from each other, just so you don't end up over tightening one side and having the lid like all sticking out in the back, and then you tighten it down, put too much pressure on it. So if you kind of alternate top left, bottom right, etc., you'll get a nice even tightening. And once we get this last screw in, it will be time to attach the blade and everything to the motor, the weapon motor. There's a blade mount that screws on to the weapon motor, and then the blade itself screws onto the blade nut along with something we like to call the bottom bump, something we made to make the horizontals drive a lot better. It reduces the friction when you're driving, and it makes it drive really, really smooth. Now, when you put in the little tiny M2 screws to attach the blade mount to the motor, you're going to want to use Loctite, as you see a picture just popped up. These will vibrate loose in fights, and so you want to make sure they're Loctited. And do it the day before the event, not when you get there, because it won't cure while you're at the event. So good. For first assembly, you can just do it loose like the video. But once you're fully assembling for a fight, you want to make sure it's all Loctited. Because if it comes loose, it's just annoying to have to fix it in the van. There's 6 holes on the blade mount, but you only use 3 of them. That way, no matter how you slide it into the fins on the motor, the holes will line up with the holes on the motor body. Now you'll grab should be the last 4 screws you have, the 632 half-inch screws. You'll press the weapon blade on. It might be a snug fit, it's designed that way. And then run one of the screws through the bottom bump, get it lined up and loosely screwed in. And then go ahead and put in the other 3, and then tighten them all up as you get around to the end. Once you get this done, you have built yourself a robot. You can go ahead and turn it on and drive it around. If you don't have a proper place to test it, I don't recommend spinning it up because even though it's plastic, it still spins well north of 100 miles an hour and can do some actual damage. So don't spin the weapon up unless you have an enclosure of some sort. But feel free to drive it around and test it all you'd like. There you have it. Plastic poison is ready to fight.